everybody, and welcome back to the Love Aspect podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Dunley, with her partner and co-host,
Joshua Saunders, back for another episode with his beautiful host and you lovely people too. It's back for episode 11, double one. We won't be seeing this many ones again till episode 101, which is far in the future, but hey, we might make it that far. We might get to that 101 episode.
We'll be old people by the time we do, but yes, it will be so much fun. And so, for today's episode, we're gonna continue to discuss, our marriages and the breakdown of them. And we'll get into a bit, if we have time, about how we met each other. Now, in the previous episode, we did say that this would be a 2-episode feature, but it might end up needing to be a 3-episode, or it may just end up being 2. It depends on where things go. So I guess I will continue from where I left off. So after the honeymoon period, myself and Steve came home to Steve's house, Steve and Martin's house, and one of the things that we had to face was Amy. And Amy was Steve's mother. And Steve and Amy were kind of estranged a little bit, like they had a very strained relationship. And, Martin had said that while he no longer got on with Amy, that Steve should really try and, have some kind of relationship with Amy, because you only get one mother in your life. Lads, when I say I have never been so hated in my life by someone, like Amy hated my guts. Like there was nothing I could do. I couldn't say anything. Absolutely not. And it got to the point where, Amy spoke with Deirdre, my mom, and decided that it might be wise to try and insult me to her face. And, she ended up saying to Deirdre, wow, you look so beautiful. And your daughter seriously doesn't. Like, what happened? Now, of course, because my mom is an absolute pro, she immediately shot that down. And that was kind of the end of that after that. And, we had chosen together, myself and Steve, to not invite Amy to our wedding because, to be honest, Amy was just toxic AF and it would have been a bad idea. She would have, screamed and shouted and acted like a child and brought the whole vibe down. Now, to be honest, given that everybody had arrived at our wedding dressed casually, I'm not sure what kind of vibe there was anyway, because people didn't seem to quite understand the sanctity of it, but, it is what it is. And so, she just ended up having no choice but to accept me as her daughter-in-law. And I'm, one of these people who, I guess I could say, I don't get on all that well with people not liking me, so I do all I can to try and actually get someone to like me, because it just goes against what I believe in, to have somebody dislike me. I'm not a bad person, I don't do bad things, and consequently, Steve's mom ended up screaming at me that she absolutely hates London. And she went on and on about London. Every time I saw her, she was screaming at me about London. For those that don't know, I was born in London, but then moved to Ireland, where I live now. And I think his mom thought I still lived in London, and kind of thought that shrieking like an ape about how bad London is would kind of scare me. But to be honest, it just ended up looking desperate and funny. And there was one point where we were going to her house for dinner. It didn't happen all that often, because let's not lie, I don't think either of us wanted that. So we go to her house for dinner, and she immediately starts screaming in the Tunisian language at Steve that something she needs is not in the house, that he has no choice, he must go out and buy her this item. And I remember specifically saying to Steve, I don't like your mom, and your mom does not like me. I'd rather that you don't leave me alone with your mom. Your mom is a very toxic individual. And to be honest, his mom was so, disgusting and angry that I did actually worry that it might become physical at some point. And I thought to myself, if this woman tried to attack me, I would have to defend myself, and I don't know what I would do in that kind of situation. Because that's just how toxic this woman is and kind of was. So Steve told me that I was being absolutely ridiculous, that obviously she wouldn't do that because she knows he would be very disappointed with her if she did. He essentially ignored my concern, went out with his sister, her daughter Eva, to get the object that she was looking for at the time, and while he was gone away, after me asking him now, by the way, to not go, he still went. While he was gone, she basically ended up taking out this photo album from somewhere. And she smacked the photo album on the table, and, Amy's English was terrible, essentially. Like, she could say a few sentences here and there. I managed to get from Amy, when she opened this album, that it was the pictures of the wedding of herself and Martin. And she was saying, like, that why does Martin take you places? Martin is a terrible man. So she ends up screaming about how bad Martin is, that Martin is a vile man, and she ends up throwing a glass at the wall and breaking it. Now, this terrified me, but I didn't let it show, and I never told Steve, because to be quite honest, I didn't see the point in telling Steve. What was he gonna do? He'd already gone. As far as I was concerned, Steve had abandoned me in that situation. There was no sense to telling him that. What was he gonna do? Retrospectively, he couldn't do anything. It was done. And so that didn't really go over all that well. He returned with whatever it was she had asked for, and the meal continued. And I suppose, being Irish, and I know I'm half Indian as well, however, I just don't handle spice all that well. To be honest, my tastes are kind of rather vanilla. But it's just because I can't handle spice. Like, the only spice that I can actively have are hot and spicy chicken wings, and that's as far as it will ever go. And over there, they use a lot of spice in their food. But because they're used to it, they don't consider it actively spicy. So, to them, it's not spicy at all. And so they're having this dish, and it's too spicy for me. Tunisian couscous is far too spicy for me. I want to eat it, but I'm actually just not able to eat it because it's burning the mouth off me. And to be honest, lads, without being too rude, I thought, you know what, this is too hot. I'll be like the flag of Japan later. Let's not do this. And, Steve's mom used to send him food, like, traditional couscous to his house for him to eat. Now, in their culture, although Steve was older than me, in their culture, it's considered common to do this. Because I was 29 and Steve was like 33 or something. And it was considered, it's quite common there for parents, especially the mother, to still, continue to send food and stuff to their son if they're not living with them. That's just what they do. It's not something I was used to, because I lived out on my own before, like without my mom. I'm obviously back living with her now, but for a couple of years I did actually live out on my own. And she never once came and gave me food, so I wasn't kind of used to that experience. Now, needless to mention, I'm more than capable of making my own food. But it's because, my mom was very into just teaching me how to do things. Because, her whole idea was, I'm not always going to be there. Hannah's going to have to know how to do some stuff. And, it's something that I really value, and I do think that every parent everywhere should teach their children this. It's a very important skill. You have to know how to do some stuff. What are you going to do when someone dies? Do you want to just be abandoned on your own and kind of with no skill? Because I don't personally think that's all that good. So, Amy starts sending Steve traditional couscous. However, because Amy knows I can't handle spice, she starts loading the couscous with extremely hot, like Scotch bonnet peppers and habaneros, thinking that Steve will make me eat it and that it will hurt me on the inside and make me sick. Unfortunately, I know this because she actually told me to my face. Her highly embarrassed daughter did translate, and the gist of it was I was meant to eat it and feel extreme pain and get very sick, because that would have brought her some form of joy. So if that's not vile, I don't know what is vile. And so, we got back from the honeymoon after the disastrous encounter with Amy, whom let's just say we didn't see all that often after. And, one of the first things I noticed is a misconception that I myself had about marriage. So, since I was young, I always knew I'd get married. The fact that it even still happened was amazing for me. So, ever since I was a young child, I'd always known I was going to get married. So the fact that it happened did amaze me because I thought, wow, I've done this. I'm a success. Someone has married me for me. I'm a real success. It's a great thing. And it was great, And then, the misconception I had was that marriage changes everything. And I thought once you're married, somebody's problems that they have will go away because they're now married. And I think, to be honest, when you love somebody, like I did love Steve, and when you love somebody, you're always looking to see the positive sides of them. And if they do negative things, it's not something that you're going to see or going to want to see. And I think this is quite important. I didn't want to see anything kind of negative about Steve. Steve was a great guy. I didn't want to see anything negative with Steve. And I remember that Martin used to always take me out for coffee once a week. And it became like a ritual. And I absolutely loved going out with Martin for coffee because he's a sweet, genuine soul. He's so intelligent to speak to and just a real buddy, just lovely. Basically, Martin is everything that Amy could never be. And, I thought that, I suppose, things in my marriage were not terrible, I guess. And we're going to the cafe in the car when all of a sudden Martin bursts into floods of tears. And he's absolutely crying. And I'm very shocked, and I'm saying to him, my God, Martin, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? What happened? And he said, I have to take you out to the coffee shop. I have to take you to the cafe. If I don't take you to the cafe, Steve is never going to do this. Steve will never take you anywhere. Steve is really upsetting me. He's never going to take you anywhere. You're a good person and you deserve good things, and I'm really sad about this. I feel like I failed Steve. He's not the best guy. When Steve was a teenager, Martin had shown him some, I suppose, documentaries, one could say, on the West and how they live in the West. But Martin had never thought to tell Steve, we don't live in the West, therefore we can't have whatever it is that they're discussing. And as a consequence, childishly, Steve chose to blame Martin for his life choices and for him being in the position he was in. Now, Martin thought it was his fault as well. But I had to say to Martin, please get a life. I love you, but get a life. Steve is 33. If Steve's life is bad, it's because he made it bad. And I suppose for after the marriage and stuff, I was coming backwards and forwards from Tunisia and Ireland all the time. And I feel like when you're doing that and you're getting the break that you need, it's very easy to convince yourself, I guess, that, that things aren't as bad as you think they're. You can easily convince yourself, it's all good in the hood and it's not really all that bad. And, my dear friend Celia got me tickets to go and visit him in January of 2020. So, I was going in January of 2020 and returning in March of 2020. However, as everybody knows, 2020 was an absolute shit show. And what with COVID going on, I got stuck there. And initially, I panicked my head off because I was like, what am I going to do? What the hell am I going to do? Where is this going to go? I'm on my own. And I just figured, you know what? I'm going to have to stick this out and deal with it. And I don't want to tell my mom it's going badly because, you know what? She'll only be stressed out for no reason. It's not like she could come and get me anyway. The whole world had shut down and I just, had to deal with that. And it was, the pandemic gave Steve the opportunity to completely give up on life. He just, stayed in his room, on his computer, nearly the whole day. And, it got to the point where I suppose I got quite stressed out because I was continuously having to tell Steve to shower. Please get in the shower. Please get in the shower. Now, as an autistic person, I am the kind of person who has struggled in her life with things like washing, I'm not going to lie, guys, it's not something I enjoy, but I do it because I know I have to do it. It doesn't matter to me that I don't enjoy it, because what I've learned since, thanks to Josh, and my mom supporting me, I've learned that as long as I have someone with me in the bathroom while I'm having a shower to talk to me, it's a hell of a lot easier. And I actually find I can relax more when I'm speaking to somebody, and I just enjoy it more. And it's become, a really good feeling and a great thing to be doing now. Now I thoroughly enjoy the notion of washing, and it's really healthy. And, so I thought to myself, I'm panicking enough about having to wash myself and doing the washing that, I don't also need to have to be telling my husband Steve to get in the damn shower. He was older than me. I mean, what is this like? Why would I have to be doing this? And so, COVID kind of went on, and while we were there, people in the Tunisian supermarkets went crazy. They started buying things they don't like in bulk, simply so someone else can't have it. And they did say that, which for me was insane. And I did turn to Martin and I did say, Martin, I'm telling you right now, if you're going to be this crazy, I am not going shopping with you. And you can buy for Steve, because I'm not going to put up with this kind of nonsense. Now, to be fair to Martin, he was quite surprised that I had thought he would be like that. However, everybody I saw was like that, so it was quite the shock to me that he wasn't. Because, I just noticed everybody being that way. So, we kind of got on, and we kind of, went and did the shopping and came back to the house. And I think for the first, 3 weeks of COVID, Martin absolutely freaked out and lost his shit. He was the angriest I have ever seen him. But it's only because Martin was so used to being able to go out when he wanted to, that he completely didn't understand how to relax and shut down at home. After 3 weeks of Martin's mood, let's say, he finally, petered out, and we realized, look, it is what it is, and he learned to actually enjoy himself. And I completely understood. He was just totally stressed. I mean, at one point, it was 3 a.m., and I saw Martin eating his dinner. And I said, Martin, what are you doing having your dinner at 3 a.m.? And he said to me, Hannah, there's a pandemic. Where exactly am I expected to go tomorrow? And I thought, you know what? Truer words have never been spoken. And in that moment, it kind of hit me that actually, me freaking out and feeling freaked out is not unique to me. And it was such a relief for me to realize that everyone else has no clue either. We're all panicking. None of us have any clue. So we just, I got into gaming myself. Before the pandemic, I had gotten a computer. Steve is very kind of tech savvy, which I am not. So, he was able to help me get a computer that was good for me. And I kind of, was writing stories online, and then I started playing games. And I noticed that the more, things started to go downhill for me, the more I would get into the gaming as a way to escape. It was like a coping mechanism. And, directly after we got married, Steve kind of kept saying very derogatory things about how I looked. That he hated how I looked, I didn't look good enough, and this kind of thing. And about 6 months after we married, I didn't tell people this because, I found it kind of shocking, I guess. But I'm okay to say it now. 6 months after we married, Steve sat me down and said, we're going to have to get divorced. Because I'm being nasty right now. And with the way you look, my comments are only going to get worse. I'm never going to be able to not comment negatively on how you look. You're a great woman and you deserve someone way better than me. I'm not it. You don't need somebody like me. We're gonna have to end this. I hope that you understand. I just can't stop saying negative things about you. We need to end this. And to be honest, I was quite shocked because, it was at that point, and again then during COVID, where I kind of realized when you're living with somebody 24/7 because you have no choice, all the problems they have become glaring problems. It's easy when you're going backwards and forwards, lads, to kind of be hiding and saying it's not what you think it is. But, it's problematic stuff, very problematic. And we got into the routine of like once a week going to the grocery shop and coming back, and I'd be gaming and watching films and just doing all kinds of things. And I suppose naively, I thought, well, COVID is here. What an opportunity for us to get physical and to get closer. It's not like we have anywhere we need to be. We'd have plenty of time. But unfortunately, Steve doesn't do intimacy well. Like as I said before, he only has a backdoor policy. And as for being, physically intimate and touching and snuggling and doing any of that, like that's alien to Steve. He would never think to do that. And it got to the point where I ended up begging Steve for affection. And lads, let me just say, like, nobody should ever have to be in the position of begging for affection. I mean, seriously. I was, I think I was like 30. Yeah, I would have been 30 at that point. Begging for affection at the age of 30. And then, like, the end of the year came and my birthday, which is, December 8th, came, and I ended up giving Steve money. Because at this point, Steve had no job. He didn't exactly try and get a new one. COVID came, so he couldn't anyway. And, I ended up giving him money, and I said to him, take this money and go out with your dad and get me a gift for my birthday. So he goes out and he's going to get me this gift. And he phones me to say, I want to get you a pair of boots, but they don't have your size. They only have size, 7. They don't have a size 6. So, will I just get the size 7? So I said, no, do not buy the size 7. Just get me jewelry instead. Get me jewelry of some kind, that's fine. Now, one would think that level of instruction would have been quite easy to follow. I was clear, I wasn't speaking double Dutch. In his infinite wisdom, Steve decides that what he will do instead is he'll abandon the shoes that are not in my size. And he'll spend my money that I gave to him for my gift on a pair of the ugliest boots I have ever seen in my life. Now bear in mind, guys, I instructed him to get me jewelry. And he bought me boots, and the boots he bought me were genuinely the ugliest boots I have ever seen in my life. Fur-lined boots, covered on the outside in buckles and spikes. And yes, for those listening, I did say spikes. I'm not the kind of person that would wear that. Anybody that knows me would know this. And when he gave me the box, like it was obviously wrapped, and I said, surely be to God, no, Steve. This isn't going to be shoes. Because obviously I told you don't get me damn shoes. So of course he was kind of saying, well, of course it's shoes. It's just not the shoes I was going to buy you. Totally not understanding. So I opened the box, and to be honest, lads, for the first time in my life, I just wanted to sob my soul out at the gift, and it's the first time that a gift has ever made me want to cry. I just felt so disrespected. I felt not heard, and I felt not seen. It was like, do you know who I am at all? Do you know anything about me? Steve, come on, dude. If you knew anything about me, you would know that I would hate this. Now, consequently, later on, Steve confessed to me he knew I'd hate it, but he actually was trying to turn me into a goth girl because I would have been hotter to him that way, apparently. And that's kind of, I guess, that was during COVID and the starting of my marriage decline. And, so Josh, tell us a bit about how your marriage started to decline.
Oh man, yeah, like, that's a really hard thing to hear about your mother-in-law, the way she treated you. Like, obviously I've heard this story before, but still, like, it's not a nice thing to hear, especially from the person you love.
Uh-huh.
And I know it's different cultures, but, it's still a hard pill to swallow, hearing something like that. Sorry, what was the question you asked me?
I said, tell us more about how your marriage declined. Like a little bit more about how it declined.
Oh, okay.
So directly, like after you got married, I suppose you could go into like what happened after you got married.
Yeah, because it didn't decline straight away, so I might just.
Well, you can talk about it being successful and then get into the decline gradually.
Yeah. Because I think I spoke about the marriage last time. I think I ended up the wedding day.
Yeah.
So
So
I'm
you
kinda-
can say after the wedding day and then what happened and then eventually get to the decline later.
Yeah, so I believe where I left off last episode was we had just gotten married. And something I didn't mention at the time was we actually had nowhere to live. We were both living with our own parents at the time. But she couldn't really live with me and my family in our house. She couldn't really live with me and my family in our house because there just wasn't a room, and I couldn't live with her and her family in her house because there wasn't enough room there either. And yeah, we weren't even living together by this point, and in hindsight, looking at it, it wasn't really a wise choice to get married without having somewhere to live together. But thankfully, a family friend of hers but luckily, like a friend of hers, someone that she knew, had a spare room in her house. She owned her own house, she had a spare room. And she said, if you guys, when you get married, if you'd like to live with us for a little while, we've got this spare room, and it's not huge, but there's a bed in there, there's a double bed in there, there's a TV, there's you could live in this room. Essentially, like, you could live in this room, like you'd have a roof over your head. It's not glamorous, it's not glitz, but it's a roof over your head, it's a bed to sleep in at night, and you guys can be together. So we appreciated it, and we did take on the offer. And I think it was literally the day after the wedding we moved in, because we didn't really go on a proper honeymoon. Because neither of us had tons of money really. I remember I was working in a warehouse at the time, and the warehouse had actually closed down by the time the wedding came around. I think it closed down a few months before the wedding. So I managed to save up a decent chunk of money, but we all got made redundant due to the warehouse closing down. So it was kind of a few months of doing what I could, keeping what money I had saved, and trying to add what I could to it. And I think she tried to. I don't know if she had any savings, but I think at some point she did start saving, or she did contribute. I can't remember if she had savings or she started saving from a certain point, but was it Susanna called her? Samantha, that's it. But yeah, Samantha had started saving at some point, or has some kind of money to contribute towards the wedding. And between us and the church, and family, friends and things, we made it work. We pulled off the wedding, and because of the lack of money, our honeymoon was a night in a hotel in the city centre. So we had our wedding, we had the venue, we got a family friend drove us down to the wedding after the reception, and we spent the night there. We had a good time. That sounds really dodgy.
He drove you down to the hotel after the wedding.
Sorry, did I say the wedding?
You did.
They drove us down to to the hotel after the reception, and we had a good time staying there overnight. We had a good time there overnight, and we returned the next day to this home we were living in together, this room that this couple had kindly let us stay in for the time being. And we didn't have much, but we had each other. We were just married, and we were happy at the time. We were in love. We were starting a life together. I suppose we had ambition in the sense of we started out small. We started with what we had, but we wanted to work hard, and we wanted to grow, and we wanted to just build a life for ourselves, make a family. Just we wanted to build a life. We wanted to build a life for ourselves, and build up a family, get our own place. Just live a happy life as a married couple, and possibly with some children. Overall as a family. We both at the time wanted kids. So, we both had that in common, and we both strived for that, and I suppose that was an overall goal that we both had. So we were, again, once we got married, we were actively kind of working towards that. Now, we weren't, from what I remember, we didn't try straight away. Of course, we would have wanted to get a place of our own first. But I think it was something we knew we wanted to do, and it came about early-ish that we started trying. And that was because I believe there was no set date on how long we were going to stay in the place for, stay with this family for. But they did say it a few months in that, unfortunately, we do need the room back. So if it would be possible for you to move out by this date, please could you? So obviously by this point I had gotten another job. I was earning just above minimum wage. I was working fair hours, and she was working fair hours too. And between us, we had a. Between us, we weren't rich, we weren't wealthy, but we were, I'd say, careful with our money overall, and we could afford somewhere. So we were looking in the area, and we did manage to find somewhere that was relatively cheap, but that's because it was good. We did manage to find somewhere that was relatively cheap, but that's because it was. It's hard to explain. It's like it was a semi-detached house, but it was split in half. So it was like half of a semi-detached house. It was small, all things considered. Like, it had an upstairs, but you couldn't even really fit like a stairway in there. It had to be a spiral stairs because of the size. But we didn't have tons of money. We had enough to get somewhere, to rent somewhere, but it's just the two of us. We kind of had to take what we could get, and that was fine with us. We were just happy to have a place of our own to call our own. So we moved into this place, and it seemed like things were looking up. Between us, we were saving money, and we finally had a place of our own. We were married. And I think not incredibly long after moving into this place, we decided we'd start trying for children. And, things were really good early on. We really did seem like a married couple. We were really happy, and yeah, just things were good at the time. Things were good. If I had to kind of pinpoint when things started to decline, I guess, I would probably say several months in, probably a few months after we moved into this place together, I did notice, and I'm going to try and be careful with what I say, because I don't want to seem very one-sided, like I'm just blaming Samantha for everything. But I do want to kind of retell the, events as I saw them. Now I believe they were. So to try and be as fair but as honest about how things went, I started to notice there was a lack of interest from Samantha just in spending time with me, and I suppose just in our marriage in general. And at first I'll be honest, I made a lot of excuses in our marriage for the way she was. I think it was really tough for me to believe that it just wasn't working. I think I was always trying to justify it in my mind. Like, oh, maybe she's just tired, or maybe she's not in the mood, or maybe she's not doing too great at the moment, or maybe she's hit a road bump, a speed bump. I was kind of making these excuses for her lack of, I suppose for lack of a better word, dedication and enthusiasm towards our marriage. And a big part of me was hoping that would just kind of fix itself, which is never a good idea, just to let things be and hope they get better, because they very rarely do. I mean, it's really something you've got to, if you're noticing that, don't just sweep it under the rug. Best thing to do is to try and tackle it head on as soon as you can. That doesn't mean be nasty about it or be aggressive about it or go on a rampage about it. It just means I believe the best thing to do is just sit down with the person, explain why you're feeling the way you are, give them some fair reasons, and see if you can come to some kind of compromise or some kind of agreement. Yeah, I believe, if you're having troubles with somebody, I believe you should just, I don't believe in sweeping it under the rug. I believe you should have a conversation with them and, again, bring up your grievances, bring up evidence of why you feel the way that you do, and just come to some kind of resolution. Just try and make them aware and try to come to some kind of compromise and agreement to see if you can get things to improve. I believe if you don't tackle it, you're just going to be stuck in that situation, nothing is going to change, and you're not really going to get any happier. Things aren't going to get fixed by ignoring it and just hoping it's going to get better. That's just from my experience anyway. Not just in marriage, in maybe all aspects of life. But unfortunately back then, I just again made excuses and just did nothing but hope things would get better, and which they didn't. So eventually, things just kind of got worse from there. Really, she just wanted to spend less time with me. She seemed less interested in our marriage. It got to the point where we were feeling more like roommates than a husband and wife. And I really was not happy with that. Things they never really got any better. I think there were occasions where we did have a good time, or maybe we did do something together. But it was so few and far between that it was never gonna work as a marriage. for that reason. And to this day, I don't really completely know the full reason why she felt the way she did. If I had to guess, she was a very in the moment kind of person. I don't feel like she did tons of forward thinking. Not to say that she couldn't, but I don't think that really was who she was. And I think like me, she liked the idea of being married and just assumed everything would work out just fine. But I think once we had been married and time had passed, and that's kind of just what it was. We were married, and I suppose the novelty of being married had come and gone. I feel she kind of realized maybe it wasn't for her. Like, oh, this is for life. But is this really the life I want to live? And again, this is just speculation from my side, from what I know of her and what I observed from her. So things never really got any better. Things never really improved. The interest just wasn't there on her side. Again, from my perspective, from what I saw, the enthusiasm just wasn't there. I think she probably regretted her choice of getting married at that point. I think she never really fully, and again this is just speculation, but never really fully realised or thought about what being married would entail in the long run. And I think once that time came, she realised made the life for her. That's not really what she wanted. So there were attempts to try and fix things to see if we could get things back on track. I did approach her once I stopped making excuses and stopped sweeping things under the rug. I did approach her and tell her that I wasn't happy and that I didn't really feel like she loved me, and that I didn't really feel like the enthusiasm for the marriage was there. She did listen to me, and she was kind about how she replied, and there did seem to be understanding from her at that moment, and it seemed like things might actually start to pick up. But they did, but then it just felt like she was forcing herself to do something she didn't want to do. I think that's how she felt, and I think she couldn't keep up with forcing herself to keep putting herself out there when that's just not what she wanted. So it did just break down, and to be honest, it did end with an argument, because I felt like promises were made that were not kept. And to be completely fair, I did get angry at her at the end, and I did accuse her of ignoring me, because there was this situation of we were meant to. The agreement we kind of came to was I asked that we spend 1 day a week together. 1 day a week where we could, be husband and wife. We were actually doing something together, we were interacting, talking, cuddling, kissing, acting like two people are in love and wanted to be together. And she agreed to that. She said that was fair. Again, it started out strong, it worked. And it seemed like things might actually improve, but I believe, from what I recall, the point where it kind of ended was she was meant to spend time with me on one of her days off. That was meant to be the day we were going to spend together. And I believe she went. Oh no, she didn't spend that time with me. I'm trying to recall it. I believe we were meant to spend the day together, and we didn't. I think she spent the day with her sister instead. I gotta admit, I'm a bit fuzzy on exactly what the details were as to why she didn't spend that day with me. But I know it involved her staying around her mum's house. I believe she spent the day with her sister and spent the next several days around her mum's house. And she did text me to say, I'm staying around my mum's. I'll see you soon. I can't completely remember what the text said, but I got the impression that she was coming back the next day, and that we would, I believe, spend time together the next day or the following day. I think she stayed around her mum's house for 3 days in a row, and I didn't really hear too much from her. So I just felt kind of very left in the mist, like, what's going on? I assumed she was coming back tomorrow. That's the impression I got. She's still not back. I've not really heard anything from her. I really don't know. And I tried messaging her I think I tried calling her at first, and she wouldn't answer. I think this was about half 12 in the afternoon. And so I called her sister straight after. They can ask, oh, hey, is she still with you? Like, I've not seen her in a few days. I thought she'd be back by now. And she was like, oh yeah, she's still here. She slept here overnight. And then about 5-10 minutes after that, I got a call from her saying like, oh yeah, sorry I missed your call. I can't remember exactly what was said, but she returned that day in, I think it was late afternoon or evening or something like that. And I think I was in like the back room, like the bedroom or something like that. And she came in and, from what I remember, laid on the sofa and started watching TV. I don't think she came through to me to let me know she was back or say hi or anything. She just kind of came in the house and started watching TV. So I was mad. I gotta admit, I was mad. And I did think in my mind, okay, I called her, I heard nothing. I call her sister, and then 10 minutes later she calls me back. Was she just pretending to be asleep? Was she just ignoring me? It just seemed very fishy to me, so I was quite mad at the time, which I'll admit. It could have just been a coincidence, maybe, because to be honest, I want to say that wasn't like her, despite everything. And I suppose I did feel in the end, after what happened, that maybe it was just a coincidence. Not to make excuses, but I just, despite kind of how I felt about her and some of the things she did, I don't think I was in her character. And I did shout at her originally, believing that, she did ignore me. And, she was laying on the sofa watching TV. I was kind of angry with her. I was shouting. It's like, why did you ignore me? That was too coincidental. She was saying that she didn't ignore me. She was just sitting there watching TV, kind of like giving me one-word answers from what I remember. And I said, do I have to turn the TV off to get your attention? And then she just kind of flipped out, started packing her bag. She did say some horrible things as well, which I think were a bit unfair. I mean, I was aggressive towards her, I will admit. So maybe her biting back, was fair enough. But some of the things she actually said, like, we know this marriage is shit anyway, why are we pretending? Although she said to me she did love me, and she was, we were trying to work through things. She never expressed to me that that's how she felt. It felt like everything kind of came out when it got to the point where she had decided it was done and that she didn't want to be in this marriage anymore. And it kind of just, it left on an argument, and that was it. She packed her stuff. She went to live with her mum. I was kind of just left in the place we were renting together by myself. And that was kind of we never actually said we were breaking up or getting a divorce at that point. But I knew at that point, and I think we both knew at that point, it just wasn't gonna happen. It wasn't gonna work. Like, this was the end. And at the time, I was quite devastated. And I was devastated more for the reasons of, I think I was very flustered. I think I found it really difficult. To get my head around a lot, kind of what had just happened and why she had said some of the things she had said, and just kind of, I think I was kind of just overwhelmed by the whole situation. I think I wasn't really expecting, when she came back and I was talking to her and I was shouting at her, that's the turn it would make. I was thinking maybe we'd have an argument and maybe we could sort through things, but I guess that just wasn't the way it was meant to be, the way it was going to happen. So I think we both just knew there and then that it wasn't going to work. And I did text her not incredibly long after she left that, okay, I know this is the end, but, I don't hate you. Hopefully you don't hate me. And fair enough, let's call it quits here. Or can we kind of be civil about this? And to be fair, she wasn't so good at replying to me. And I never actually heard her voice once after that. It was all through text. She wouldn't answer any of my calls. But it did go relatively smoothly, to be honest, after that. When it came to the communication, I guess what I'm trying to say is, so there wasn't really any aggression there. It was more, it was civil. It was civil, and I'm not, even to this day, I don't know how she feels about me. I don't know if it's just, if she doesn't like me and she's being civil, or if we just both called it quits and, there wasn't animosity there from her. She just wanted to, like me, just get things wrapped up and get on back to her life. The communication at the end wasn't difficult so much. It was difficult in the sense of waiting for a reply from her and getting her to do things in a timely manner. It was difficult after that. Again, not so much because we had separated. It was more difficult because of picking up the pieces after the separation. Obviously, we were renting a place, and I was kind of left to sort that out on my own, despite us both being on the lease for it. And it's difficult to try and get her to arrange her stuff being collected. We did manage it, but it did, again, in a time-sensitive manner. It was difficult to get her to collect her stuff in a timely manner to make that smooth. That was kind of always looming over me over the last few months of living there. Like, I'm just as responsible for this place as her, but I can't do anything about her stuff. She has to do stuff. She has to handle getting her stuff moved and arranged. Like, that's something I have no control over. That has to come down to her. So when I'm kind of left in the dark, that was difficult. I didn't know if I was going to have to handle that somehow, or spoke to each other over text, but we didn't speak to each other directly. I think in a way a lot of communication was done through third parties or friends, things like that. And yeah, that's kind of, I suppose, the climax of my story, really. We lasted about just under 2 years. I moved back in with my parents. She moved back in with her mum. We've never really seen each other. We had communication after the whole divorce happened. I think, without getting too technical, there was a lot of, because of the way we separated, to my knowledge, at the time there wasn't an easy way to file for a divorce or to get our divorce finalized, I guess. So we were just kind of in the void of being separated for a period of time, and that was difficult. When it came to divorce, I did kind of have to handle pretty much all of that myself. Obviously, she had to play a part. She did the things that she absolutely had to do, which I'm thankful for. A lot of it did rest on me to get a divorce done, and from there, that was kind of it. I was out of her life, she was out of mine. Thankfully, our families were still kind of good with each other, like they never really communicated, but there was no animosity towards anyone. I remember her mom and even her granddad would wish me happy birthday on Facebook for the next several years, even after we separated and got divorced. But for me and her, it was kind of, that was it. We never communicated, never saw each other after the divorce was really done. I believe I kind of thanked her at the very end when it was finalised and wished her good luck. Again, that's a bit easy, I can't completely remember. I think I did something along those lines, but yeah, that's kind of where my marriage ended and where my relationship with her went.
Okay, and so, that's, I guess, how Josh's marriage ended, and So, getting back to my marriage, I had kind of, I guess, resigned myself to the fact that in my marriage, I would need to be the romantic individual. And so I would need to be the one that instigates date night or, reminds Steve of Valentine's Day. As an example, our first Valentine's Day, Steve went out to his local bakery and he got me a slice of cheesecake. Now, anybody that knows me would know I'm obsessed with cheesecake. I love cheesecake. Give it to me in any kind of, capacity. Just, oh my goodness. Lemon cheesecake is my favorite, but they're all good. And so he gets me a cheesecake and he gets me some roses that his dad, Martin, has grown in the garden. And he puts them all on a plate. And he has written a handwritten sign that says, "This is the plate of love. I love you." It was really sweet and thoughtful. And I kind of thought, wow, Steve is actually capable of romance. This is so nice. And then, of course, the next Valentine's Day rolls around. And there's absolutely nothing. And me, I suppose, being as naive as I was, I thought maybe Steve doesn't know what day it is today. Maybe he's not aware it's Valentine's Day. I'll let him know. People can forget. I sometimes forget things. So, I said, "Steve, do you know it's Valentine's Day?" And he said, "Well, of course I know that." And I said, "Well, why did you not get me anything or give me anything for Valentine's Day?" And Steve said, "Well, I did it once. I didn't think I'd have to be doing it every year. Who the hell has time for that?" And so I was quite shocked by that. And then, quite early in the marriage, I had decided that I was going to go out shopping. And his uncle had kind of been saying to him, "Steve, you're absolutely scandalous. How can you allow your wife to go out shopping on her own? What's wrong with you? Why do you not join her? You should be with her. What happens if she kind of wants to be spending, all her money?" Now, to be honest, that made me laugh because the uncle assumed he even had money. He didn't at that point, so I had money. And I was just, I was a very independent person. And I was like, what, if I want to go somewhere, I'm going to go. I'm not relying all the time on people to be taking me places because I don't have time for that. I'd rather just go. So in Tunisia, everybody takes cabs everywhere. That's what they do. They're very cheap. A cab to like the local shopping center is probably the equivalent of like €3 or something. They're really cheap. And so I decided, okay, I'm gonna go and flag a cab down and I'm gonna go. So I flagged down this cab and I'm excitedly going across the street when a car hits me and essentially knocks me down. Now I'm actually okay. Nothing is broken or anything like that. But I do go into shock to the point that I can't remember how to communicate properly. And I end up on the ground like a sobbing mess. And people come to help me up. And all I can think to say while I'm crying is, I have a husband. I have a husband. So I get my phone out. This guy offers me his phone and we dial Steve's number. Now, when I say that Steve, God love him, is the most useless individual to have in a crisis, so we do ring Steve. Steve immediately answers and thinks the worst. And because of the extremely panicked condition I'm in, Steve doesn't quite understand that I'm not capable of thinking or speaking logically right now. And so I'm just saying that I need him to come and get me. I'm on the corner. He needs to come and get me. Unfortunately for me, Steve's response is, what the fuck happened, and do I need to get a knife to stab somebody? Who hurt you? And of course, I'm like, Steve, what the hell? No, why would a knife be your first choice? I don't need the knife. I need you to care for me. What is this? It's really not cool. And so the guy who hit me with his car, to be honest, lads, he swung out around the corner very quickly. He had no opportunity to see me or vice versa. So this guy starts basically crying and panicking and freaking out himself. And so he drives us to the hospital and waits with us, and he actually does drive us home. And he's able to contribute what little money he has towards my healthcare visit. So I go there, and my shin is extremely sore, but not broken or anything. And so they take me into this room to do an x-ray. And the guy says to me, wow, you must have had a lot of dairy. As a child, you have epic bones. Whoa, your bones are so good and strong. Wonderful bones. Could we study this? And I was like, yeah, study it if you want. So they just gave me some pain meds and sent me home and said, rest for a couple of days and you'll be quite fine. And that was okay. Obviously, no, Steve's reaction had not been great, but what can you do? It is what it is. And so, things get better. And then we're going to visit Steve's relatives. And Steve is driving. And I realize that I don't have any usable shoes on me. That the only shoes I have are an ancient pair of sandals that I own. And so I kind of just resign myself to the fact, look, I don't have other shoes. I'll have no option. I just have to wear these sandals. It just is what it is. They're as old as the hills, but I have no choice. So I'm thinking in my head, okay, look, you have no choice. You'll just have to wear them and get over yourself. Which is what I do. So we get in the car and we're driving to his relative's house when suddenly Steve notices the sandals and says he's absolutely mortified. They look terrible. They're really old. He can't believe I'd even wear them. And before I have the opportunity to kind of explain to Steve, look, I really didn't have a choice. I had to do this. Steve flies into this blind rage about the sandals, saying I'm out to sabotage him, I'm out to embarrass him. He's absolutely mortified and basically ends up crashing his car. Both of us are fine. None of us are hurt. The car has a small dent in it, but nothing major. Again, now, I feel like God or someone was looking out for me because nothing bad happened. And then we drive off, and he basically starts screaming his head off at me that it's my fault we've done this. I wore bad shoes. He couldn't cope with how embarrassing it was, and he got so angry he couldn't even see the road properly. It was that cross. And so we get to his relative's house, and, I'm asking his relatives pointedly, like his aunt and his cousins. I ask, what do you think of my shoes? And they're telling me that they find my question very strange, and why would they be thinking anything of my sandals? And I explain that, Steve couldn't cope with how my sandals looked and crashed the car. And they all start saying to me, that's not funny. Nobody would be that stupid. No one is gonna crash a car over sandals. Don't be ridiculous. Do you really expect us to believe that? Steve then confirms he absolutely did crash the car because who the hell wears sandals that are that bad? That he got so mad he couldn't see the road. And then he basically essentially screamed in my face that I'd have to pay to get it fixed because it was my fault for wearing bad shoes. So of course I said, being who I am, get some boiling water, open the bonnet, get boiling water, pour it on the outside. Someone is going to grab a towel and push from the inside out. And voila, the dent came out and, saved the day, and no one had to pay anything. They were quite surprised by that. But that's just, how it went. And unfortunately, Steve had basically gotten into the habit of telling me, because I kept kind of having to almost beg for intimacy from Steve. And Steve eventually explained that he couldn't be intimate with me because he found me smelly. And of course, naturally enough, when somebody finds you smelly, you're gonna get really insecure and you're gonna start showering religiously, which is what I did. Now, to be honest, lads, I started panic showering because who wants to smell like that's gross? Now, bearing in mind, of course, Steve refuses to shower, yet I smell and I'm the problem. Make that make sense. So I start showering religiously. Eventually, Steve kind of confesses, look, it's not you, it's me. I'm the problem. And again, this is why we need to divorce. Because as I said before, any kind of date night we had, I would arrange. And I would pay for. If we didn't get a cab, like his friend who drove would have to drive us, but then his friend would be there on our date night, which really is not a date night. Steve meant well in some regards, but had no concept of romance, and he had no business being married, because, he ended up saying that marriage to him was just a piece of paper. I took marriage very seriously. You don't just get married. That's not what life is. And, it was just really upsetting. And I remember being terrified. Deirdre, liked Steve very much. And I remember thinking my whole family, whom I love dearly, got really quite, mad and aggressive about me even going there on my own and everything like that. I felt shame. And I was mortified, like, are my family going to say, ha, we told you so? I have to go now and tell my mother that my marriage has tanked, essentially it failed, and I have to get divorced. And I had several panic attacks leading up to that moment that I did not tell her about. Because, to be fair, I didn't see the point in it, actually, but I eventually managed to get home. And I got home, and to be honest, I did have an absolute breakdown when I got home. I had missed my mom so much. The marriage had just been terrible. And, as Josh said, like, when you're trying to convince yourself things can eventually get better, like, the more you do, like, eventually something has got to give. And you have to stop. Sometimes it's not you. And it's not normal, guys, to be begging for intimacy or even just normal affection all the time. I was exhausted from begging for affection every day. This is not regular. And to be honest, it quite upsets me that I didn't realize at the time how irregular that was. And so, I sat my mom down. To be honest, I did break down. We went out to the countryside for dinner, and I did have to tell her, look, Steve and I, the marriage tanked, we're gonna have to get divorced. And I was terrified that she'd feel like, you absolutely failed, shame on you. And like, to be honest, she was just the most amazing person. She just embraced me and, fully supported me. And, eventually the divorce did happen. And, Steve and I are friendly. Because I think it's important. I don't believe in hating your ex. Because, hating someone is like wanting to poison someone but then drinking the poison yourself. That's the way I view it. I don't see the point. So, every so often I will still talk to Steve. And, we just wish each other well. Both of us are well aware that it didn't work out. We didn't get what we expected from the marriage. And, to be honest, like in the next episode now, Josh and I will go into the period directly after the divorce, dating other people and then eventually finding each other. And we can kind of talk more then about, what happened next. So, guys, that has been the story of, how the both of us got married and how the relationship essentially declined and the divorce. And I just feel it was very important to be out there and open about this, because if we're not open about these things, nobody can learn anything. And for me, I feel like it's very important that, we're always teaching people things they can learn from. I wanted to be vulnerable and open about my story because I don't want anybody out there to feel like they have to be less than or to accept behavior that is less than. You shouldn't have to beg for intimacy. You should not have to beg for affection. Like, Steve knew that marriage wasn't for him and still chose to essentially marry me. And, it just didn't work out, and he should have known better. And, it just should have been a better experience. But, it's something to learn from, and the way I look at it is at least I learned what I definitely don't want. And I knew going forward exactly what it was I was looking for. And as I said, I don't think it's healthy to hate somebody unless they're truly vile. In that case, then, if it ever got physical or anything like that, then I would advocate hating someone. But, it didn't, so it was okay. I just think, having healthy and positive opinions in life is good. And, I'll always wish Steve well. And I'll always hope that, he's successful in his life and that he finds the happiness that best suits him. I've certainly found the happiness that best suits me. Joshua fills me with such extreme joy and hope and love and, every kind of positive emotion I suppose one can feel. And I just want to say to people, it's possible to find someone like that. They are out there. You may have to kiss a few frogs before you get there, but you will get there. And it will be a wonderful experience. And, if you love somebody, you have to love all the things about them. And I just think that's a very important message to put out there. So, thank you so much for staying lovely and for staying around to listen to our interesting stories. I hope that you have a wonderful week ahead. Like the podcast, share it with your friends and family. And again, thank you once more for joining us. We've loved having you.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Like Hannah was saying, these were very personal, very real things that happened to us, and I never really kind of thought about it till now, but a lot of what I spoke about with my marriage are things that I've not really had to think about in years. They've kind of been tucked to the back of my mind all this time. I mean, this happened years ago now. It's been a while. I've kind of gone through it and left it in the past. So to kind of relive it again, to have to, to think about it again. And for the most part, what I said is the first time where I've put what I've said into words out loud. And, kind of, this is pretty much the first time that anyone has heard some of the stuff that I've said. Like, I've never really brought some of the events I mentioned up to people before. Some of this is probably even news to Hannah. Like, I'm sure I've not said some of this to Hannah, and not in a secrecy way, but in a way that, again, maybe I didn't think about it when I was telling Hannah about my previous marriage and, my divorce. Like, I think I kind of told her what had happened, or maybe not in so much detail. So I'm sure some of this information to her is brand new, and again, putting some of this into words when it's only ever been, thoughts and memories was definitely a very strange experience for me. But yeah, like Hannah was saying, like they're our stories, they're what happened to us. They were our, our real thoughts, our real feelings, our real experiences, and we both struggled in our own way. It was very difficult for us both at times, and we've come a long way since then.
We sure have.
So just thank you very much for listening to our stories. Take care of yourselves. Next week will be a much more light-hearted. We know this story has a happy ending, so we know we can end it on a happy note. thank you for listening to our personal stories, our personal experiences, and taking this journey with us. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Take care. Bye bye, everyone.
Bye bye.